3 months after the Six-Day War ended, Ambassador Lee Hae-yun stood before the largest gathering in human history. Representatives from every nation on Earth had come to Seoul to witness something unprecedented, a war crimes trial for an alien commander. Commander Vexhal sat in the defendant's chair, no longer wearing his impressive blue uniform. The alien who had once commanded orbital fleets and ground armies now wore simple gray clothing, provided by human guards. His cold black eyes stared straight ahead as the charges were read. You stand accused of ordering the massacre of 847 civilians, including 23 children, in violation of the basic laws of war and common decency. The trial was broadcast across Earth and transmitted into space toward every known alien civilization. Humanity wanted the galaxy to know that there were consequences for attacking Earth. Lee served as the primary prosecutor. She had spent weeks preparing, studying Valorian law and galactic treaties. But the most powerful moment came when she called her first witness. A young girl named Park Min-ji walked slowly to the witness stand. She was 8 years old and one of only 5 survivors from Choi So-young's class. Her teacher had died protecting her from Valorian energy weapons. Min-ji, Lee said gently, can you tell us what happened that day in the square? The little girl looked directly at Vexhal as she spoke. The teacher told us to hold hands so we wouldn't get lost. She said we were asking the Sky People to let us stay home with our families. What happened when the Sky People arrived? The big one with the cold eyes said we had to be quiet. But we weren't being loud. We were just holding hands and singing. Then what happened? Minji's voice became very small. Teacher Choi covered me with her body when the lights came. She was warm and then she was cold, and she never moved again. In the defendant's chair, Vexhal showed no emotion, but around the world, humans watching the trial felt their anger rekindling. The war might be over, but the memory of what the Valorians had done would never fade. The trial continued for 2 weeks. Evidence was presented, witnesses testified, and expert testimony explained the laws that Vexhal had violated. But everyone knew the outcome was already decided. The alien commander had admitted his actions. The only question was the penalty. While the trial proceeded, life on Earth was rapidly changing. Dr. Kim Min-ho's quantum encryption technology had evolved during the war. Now humans had communication systems more advanced than anything the Valorians possessed. His research team was working on projects that would have been impossible before the invasion. Faster-than-light communication, energy shields, and spacecraft designs. The funny thing, Min-ho told Park Dae-ho during one of their meetings, is that fighting the Valorians taught us more about advanced technology than cooperating with them ever did. Engineer Bae Seo-han had become Earth's Minister of Defense, overseeing the conversion of his improvised weapons into permanent defense systems. Orbital platforms now protected every major city, armed with weapons that combined human ingenuity with captured Valorian technology. We'll never be caught unprepared again, he promised the United Earth Council. Any alien force that approaches, our system will face defenses they can't imagine. Lieutenant Yoon Ji-won commanded humanity's first interstellar fleet, ships built using technology captured during the Six-Day War but designed with purely human innovations. Her pilots trained for combat scenarios the Valorians had never considered, preparing to fight with the emotional unpredictability that had won Earth's freedom. Hacker Oh Min-sok had become Earth's cyber warfare specialist, developing computer viruses based on human art, music, and literature. His greatest achievement was a program that could crash any logical computer system by forcing it to analyze human poetry. Logic is their strength and their weakness, he explained to his team. They can process infinite data, but they can't handle a single emotional decision. Medic Shin Yunbi had established field hospitals and medical protocols that would ensure humanity could treat casualties in any future conflict. But more importantly, she had insisted on medical care for captured Valorian soldiers, proving that humans could fight fiercely without becoming monsters. We won by being better than them, she said. Not just stronger, but better. On the final day of the trial, Lee Hae-yun delivered her closing argument. She stood before the court and spoke not just to the humans present, but to any aliens who might be listening across the galaxy. 3 years ago, the Valorian Empire made a critical error in judgment. They looked at humanity and saw weakness where there was patience. They saw submission where there was restraint. They saw primitive beings where there was a species capable of incredible adaptation and determination. She pointed at Vexhal, who had remained emotionless throughout the trial. This defendant ordered the murder of children because he believed humans would accept it. He believed we would continue to cooperate, continue to be patient, continue to accept our assigned place in his empire. Lee walked closer to the defendant's chair. He was wrong about everything. Human patience has limits. Human restraint has boundaries. And when those boundaries are crossed, this species becomes something that no empire in the galaxy can control. The verdict was unanimous. Vexhal was found guilty of war crimes and crimes against sentient beings. His sentence was life imprisonment on Earth, where he would spend the rest of his days surrounded by the species he had underestimated. As the trial ended, Park Dae-ho stood on the steps of the courthouse and addressed the crowd that had gathered. His words were broadcast across the planet and transmitted to every corner of space. To any civilization listening to this broadcast, understand this message clearly. Earth is no longer a target for conquest. We are no longer a primitive species to be protected or controlled. We are humans, and we have proven what that means. He looked up at the sky, where Earth's new defense satellites glinted like stars. For 3 years, we endured occupation because we hoped for peaceful coexistence. We worked under alien rule because we believed cooperation was better than conflict. We accepted restrictions on our freedom because we thought patience would be rewarded. The crowd had grown silent, hanging on every word. But we also spent those 3 years learning. Learning about your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. Learning that advanced civilizations can be just as blind and arrogant as any primitive tribe. Dae-ho's voice carried. Across the square and around the world, the Valorian Empire discovered that human patience is not infinite. Any other empire that approaches our world with conquest in mind will learn the same lesson. We are not weak because we prefer peace. We are not primitive because we value cooperation. And we are definitely not inferior because we choose to be patient. He paused, letting his words sink in. But when our patience ends, when our restraint breaks, when our preference for peace is met with violence against our children, then you will face what the Valorians faced. 7 billion humans fighting with everything we have, everything we can build and everything we can improvise. Around the world, humans cheered. In space, alien civilizations listened and took note. Earth was no longer a potential conquest. It was a warning. The Valorians called us inferior, Dae-ho continued. They learned the truth during 6 days of warfare that showed them what humanity is really capable of. We adapt faster than you can counter. We improvise solutions you can't predict. We fight with emotional fury your logical systems cannot process. He smiled grimly, remembering the underground tunnels where the resistance had been born. And most importantly, we remember. Every species that has ever threatened humanity will be remembered. Every alien that has ever harmed a human child will face justice. And every empire that thinks Earth is a soft target will discover why the Valorian fleet is still running toward the edge of the galaxy. As the crowd dispersed, little Park Minji approached Dae-ho. The 8-year-old survivor of the Seoul massacre looked up at the resistance leader who had become Earth's greatest hero. Mr. Dae-ho, are the Sky People ever coming back? Dae-ho knelt down to her level, thinking of Choi So-young and the 23 children who had died in Vexhal's massacre. Not to hurt us, sweetheart. Never again to hurt us. Above them, Earth's new satellites continued their eternal watch, powered by human ingenuity and protected by human determination. The planet that had once been occupied now stood as the galaxy's newest superpower, built on the foundation of 7 billion people who had finally reached the limits of their patience. The Valorians had made one fatal mistake. They had confused human restraint with human weakness. They had learned the difference during 6 days of warfare that proved what humans were truly capable of when pushed beyond their breaking point. Now every civilization in the galaxy knew the truth. Earth was no longer a target, it was a warning. The war began at exactly 6 m.d.m. Seoul time on a Monday morning. Across the globe, Oh Min-seok's electromagnetic pulse weapons detonated simultaneously. Every Valorian ground installation on Earth went dark in the same instant. Alien commanders who had been drinking their morning stimulants suddenly found themselves cut off from orbital support, unable to communicate with each other, and surrounded by 7 billion very angry humans. Park Dae-ho stood on a rooftop in Seoul, watching alien ships fall from the sky as their systems failed. The EMP attack had been more effective than anyone had dared hope. "All units, this is Sol Command." He spoke into his quantum communicator. "Operation Human Storm is now active. Show them what humans do when we're done being patient." Lieutenant Yoon Ji-won led the first airstrike. Her squadron consisted of converted civilian aircraft, cargo planes loaded with Bae Seoan's improvised explosives, crop dusters carrying chemical weapons, and racing helicopters armed with armor-piercing rockets. None of it should have worked against advanced alien technology. But the Valorians had never faced an enemy that fought with pure emotional fury. Ji-won's converted passenger jet screamed over the Seoul administrative center at barely 50 feet altitude. Her cargo bay doors opened, releasing hundreds of explosive drones that swarmed the building like angry bees. Each drone was guided by a human pilot using video game controllers, their emotional reactions too chaotic for Valorian computers to predict or counter. The building where Commander Vexhal had announced the relocation plan disappeared in a series of explosions. In London, General Morrison's forces emerged from the underground tunnels in coordinated swarms, but their coordination was purely human. Groups of neighbors fighting together, families protecting families, strangers united by shared rage. The Valorians' tactical computers couldn't analyze attack patterns that were based on emotional connections rather than military logic. Morrison himself led a charge against the London district headquarters, wielding a weapon that Bae Seohan had built from power tools and explosive charges. The first Valorian soldier he encountered raised his energy rifle and fired. Morrison should have died instantly. Instead, he ducked, rolled, and came up firing. The improvised weapon punched through Valorian armor like it was paper. As the alien fell, Morrison shouted the battle cry that spread through resistance forces around the world. "This is for the children." In Tokyo, Commander Tanaka's forces turned the city's electronics manufacturing capabilities into a weapon. Assembly lines that had built communication devices for the Valorians suddenly began producing jamming equipment. Factory workers who had spent 3 years making alien technology now used that same knowledge to destroy it. Tanaka personally led a raid on the orbital communication array that kept Valorian ground forces connected to their ships. As his team fought through alien defenses, he carried a device that Oh Min-seok had designed specifically for this moment, a computer virus written in human poetry and music. When Tanaka plugged the device into the Valorian communication system, the entire network began playing Bach's funeral marches and Shakespeare's tragedies on repeat. Alien AI systems across East Asia crashed trying to process the emotional content. In New York, Colonel Rodriguez discovered something the Resistance had only theorized about. Valorians were physically stronger than humans, but they tired much faster in Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere. His fighters used hit-and-run tactics, forcing the aliens into prolonged chases through the city's vertical maze. Rodriguez watched from a skyscraper window as Valorian soldiers, weighed down by their heavy armor, collapsed from exhaustion after pursuing human fighters up 40 flights of stairs. The humans, running on pure adrenaline and hometown fury, barely seemed winded. "Medic teams move in," he ordered into his communicator. "Take their weapons and equipment. Leave the aliens alive but unconscious." Shin Yunbi had insisted on that part of the battle plan. "We're not monsters," she had said. "We defeat them. We don't become them." By the end of the first day, Valorian forces on Earth were in complete disarray. Their communication networks were down, their computer systems were crashing from emotional overload, and their soldiers were discovering that human fighters didn't follow any rules they understood. Commander Vexhal survived the destruction of his headquarters and retreated to a fortified position in the mountains outside Seoul. From there, he sent desperate messages to the orbital fleet. Request immediate military support. Human resistance is using unconventional tactics. Our standard countermeasures are ineffective. The response came 12 hours later. Orbital support unable to provide assistance. Human cyber attacks have compromised navigation systems. Fleet moving to safe distance. Vexhal stared at the message in disbelief. The mighty Valorian fleet was retreating from a species they had called primitive. The second day brought new horrors for the alien occupiers. Human forces began using psychological warfare that the Valorians' logical minds couldn't process. Loudspeakers throughout occupied cities played children's laughter and playground songs, the voices of the 23 students killed in the Seoul massacre. Valorian soldiers, trained to fight military opponents, found themselves paralyzed by the sound of human children singing. Their commanders ordered them to destroy the speakers, but every time they did, more appeared. Oh Min-seok had hacked into every communication system on Earth and turned them all into weapons of emotional warfare. The third day saw the beginning of systematic hunting. Human fighters stopped attacking installations and began tracking individual Valorians. Groups of resistance fighters would surround a single alien soldier and force him to surrender. They took weapons, armor, and equipment, then released the soldier with a message. Tell your friends, Earth is no longer your planet. By the fourth day, surviving Valorian forces were trapped in isolated pockets, unable to communicate with each other or receive support from orbit. They had advanced technology, superior armor, and better weapons. But none of that mattered when they were outnumbered 7 billion to 1 by opponents who fought with the fury of parents protecting their children. Bae Seohan's improvised weapons were taking a devastating toll. Valorian armor that could withstand military-grade explosives was being penetrated by devices built in garage workshops. The aliens' technological superiority meant nothing when humans could adapt and improvise faster than they could respond. The fifth day brought the beginning of the end. Park Dae-ho led a strike force to Vexhal's mountain stronghold. The alien commander had spent 4 days watching his forces across the globe get systematically dismantled by an enemy he had dismissed as inferior. Dae-ho's team approached the fortified position using tactics no military academy had ever taught. They came from 7 different directions simultaneously, each group led by someone who had lost family in the Seoul massacre. They fought with weapons that shouldn't have existed. Using strategies that made no logical sense, they fought like humans. Vexhal's remaining soldiers fought desperately, but they were exhausted, demoralized, and completely cut off from support. One by one, they fell to improvised weapons wielded by fighters who refused to give up. The 6th day dawned with Vexhal himself surrounded in his command bunker. Park Dae-ho stood outside the sealed door, holding one of Bae's armor-piercing charges. Commander Vexhal, he called through the door. This is Park Dae-ho, resistance leader for the Seoul district. You have 30 seconds to surrender. The door opened. Vexhal emerged, his hands raised, his armor damaged, and his weapons discarded. The alien commander who had called humans inferior now looked at Park Dae-ho with something that might have been respect. Your species, Vexhal said slowly, is not what we believed. No, Dae-ho replied. We're not. Around the world, the last Valorian strongholds were falling. The 6-day war was ending not with humanity's surrender, but with the complete collapse of alien resistance. In orbit above Earth, the Valorian fleet received a final transmission from their ground commander. Evacuation complete. Recommend immediate withdrawal from this system. Humans are more dangerous than assessed. The ships that had arrived 3 years earlier to subjugate humanity now fled into deep space, carrying word of Earth's victory to every corner of the Valorian Empire. Humans had been patient for 3 years. When that patience finally broke, it shattered with the force of 7 billion people who refused to be conquered. The Seoul massacre changed everything. Within 48 hours of the shooting, Kim Min-ho's quantum encryption network connected resistance cells across 6 continents. For the first time since the Valorian occupation began, humans could coordinate on a global scale. Park Dae-ho sat in the expanded command center, surrounded by screens showing encrypted messages from around the world. The abandoned subway station had become the nerve center of humanity's awakening. Report from London, Lieutenant Yoon Ji-won called out, reading from her terminal. General Morrison says they have 15,000 volunteers and growing. They're converting the old underground tunnels into weapons factories. Tokyo? Commander Tanaka reports 12,000 fighters. They've been stockpiling materials from the electronics factories for months. New York? Colonel Rodriguez has the biggest group, 20,000 volunteers. They're using the subway system in abandoned buildings in Brooklyn. Dae-ho nodded grimly. The numbers were impressive, but he knew they faced impossible odds. The Valorians had advanced weapons, powered armor, and orbital support. Humans had anger and improvised explosives. The entrance tunnel echoed with approaching footsteps. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, new faces that Dae-ho recognized from intelligence reports. Engineer Bei Seohan was a stocky man with calloused hands and grease under his fingernails. Before the invasion, he had designed bridges and buildings. Now he built weapons from scrap metal and household chemicals. Hacker Oh Min-seok looked like a college student, thin and pale from spending too much time in front of computer screens. But his fingers could slip through alien computer networks like a ghost. Medic Shin Yunbi had been a trauma surgeon before the occupation. Now she treated resistance fighters in hidden clinics and planned field medical support for the coming war. "Welcome to the revolution," Daeho said. "What do you have for me?" Bei Seohan spoke first. "I've been studying Valorian technology for 2 years. Their equipment is advanced, but it has weaknesses. They rely too heavily on centralized control systems. If we can disrupt their communications, their coordinated advantages disappear. What about their armor? Tough but not invincible. I've developed armor-piercing rounds using recycled Valorian metal from their construction projects. The irony is beautiful. We'll kill them with their own materials." Oh Min-seok leaned forward excitedly. "I found something even better. The Valorians' computer systems are purely logical. They can't process emotional decision-making or irrational behavior. When I fed random human music and poetry into their networks, their AI systems crashed trying to understand it." "You crashed their computers with poetry?" "Shakespeare's sonnets brought down their entire surveillance grid for 6 hours last week. They still don't know why." Shin Yunbi opened a medical bag filled with supplies. "I've been analyzing Valorian physiology from blood samples collected during their medical screenings of human workers. They're stronger than us, but they have vulnerabilities. Their respiratory system can't handle Earth's high oxygen concentration for extended periods. In prolonged combat, they'll tire faster than humans." Daeho felt hope stirring in his chest. Maybe the odds weren't as impossible as they seemed. "What about weapons?" he asked Bei. The engineer smiled grimly. "Follow me." He led them deeper into the tunnel system, through passages that had been carefully expanded and reinforced. They emerged into a vast underground chamber that had once been a subway maintenance facility. Now it looked like a weapons factory. Dozens of people worked at improvised assembly lines, building devices that looked like nothing the world had ever seen. Bei pointed to different workstations with pride. Electromagnetic pulse grenades made from microwave oven parts, armor-piercing rockets built from construction equipment, explosive drones constructed from toy helicopters and fertilizer. "This is all homemade?" "Every piece. The Valorians monitor all manufacturing facilities, but they don't pay attention to hardware stores, electronics shops, or toy stores. We've been buying components for months and assembling them in secret." Jiwon picked up one of the improvised rifles. "Will these actually work against Valorian armor? One-on-one?" "No, but we're not planning to fight. One-on-one." Bei led them to a large table covered with maps of Seoul. Red marks indicated Valorian positions throughout the city. The aliens have 43 ground installations in Seoul alone. Each one is heavily defended and connected to orbital support. Fighting them directly would be suicide. So how do we fight them? "We don't fight their installations. We fight them." Bei pointed to different locations on the map. Valorians follow predictable patterns. They travel the same routes, use the same landing zones, follow the same schedules. They're organized and logical. That sounds like an advantage for them. It would be if they were fighting other Valorians, but they're fighting humans. Oh Min-seok joined the conversation. "Humans are unpredictable. We make emotional decisions, take irrational risks, and adapt constantly. Their computer systems are designed to counter logical opponents. We'll be chaos fighting order," Shin Yunbi added. "Medical training teaches you that the human body survives through adaptation. We'll adapt faster than they can counter." Daeho studied the maps. The plan was audacious and terrifying. Instead of trying to match Valorian technology, they would use human unpredictability as a weapon. "How long do we have?" Ambassador Lee Ha-yoon's voice came from behind them. She had entered quietly, her diplomatic clothes replaced by resistance gear. "The relocation ships arrive in 4 months," she said. "But Vexhal is accelerating the timeline. He wants to start loading people in 6 weeks. Then we move in 5 weeks," Daeho decided. "The weapons won't all be ready," Bei warned. "They don't have to be perfect. They just have to work long enough." "What about coordination?" Jiwon asked. "Even with Minho's encryption, organizing a global attack is incredibly complex." Daeho looked around at his team. A former naval officer, a physicist, a pilot, a diplomat, an engineer, a hacker, and a doctor. 7 people preparing to take on an interstellar empire. We keep it simple. Every resistance cell gets the same message. When the signal comes, attack everything Valorian in your area. No complex tactics, no elaborate strategies. Just pure human fury. That's not a battle plan, Lee said. That's chaos, exactly. The Valorians are expecting military resistance, organized armies following predictable strategies. Instead, they'll face 7 billion angry humans fighting with improvised weapons and emotional logic. Oh, Min Seok grinned. I can hack their communication networks and flood them with contradictory information. If their systems can't handle poetry, imagine what angry human music will do to them. How long can we sustain this kind of fighting? Shin Yunbi asked practically. We don't need to sustain it, Deho replied. We just need to prove that occupying Earth costs more than it's worth. He activated Minho's quantum communicator and spoke into the device. This is sole command to all resistance cells. Prepare for Operation Human Storm. In 35 days, we remind the galaxy what happens when you push humans too far. Responses flooded in from around the world. London confirmed readiness. Tokyo reported weapons stockpiles complete. New York announced volunteer training accelerated. Sydney, Cairo, Moscow, Mexico City, Lagos, every major city on Earth confirmed they were ready to fight. For 3 years, humanity had endured alien occupation with patience and hope. They had worked the long hours, followed the rules, and trusted that cooperation would lead to better treatment. The Seoul massacre had shattered that patience forever. Now, in hidden tunnels and secret factories around the globe, 7 billion humans prepared to show the Valorian Empire what their species was truly capable of when driven to the edge. The aliens had called humans inferior. They were about to learn why that assessment was catastrophically wrong. The news broke on a cold morning in November. Ambassador Lee Ha-yoon stood before the cameras in the Seoul Administrative Center, her face pale and tired. Behind her, a massive Valorian flag hung from the ceiling. The Valorian Empire has announced a new initiative, she said, reading from a prepared statement. 50 million humans have been selected for relocation to mining facilities on Kepler 442b and Proxima Centauri. This voluntary program will provide opportunities for human workers to contribute to galactic civilization. The word voluntary stuck in her throat. She knew, as did everyone watching, that nothing about this was voluntary. Within hours, the protests began. Choi So-young was teaching her 3rd grade class when the announcement played on the school's communication system. 28 8-year-old faces looked up at her with confusion and fear. One little girl raised her hand. Teacher Choi, what does relocation mean? So-young knelt down beside the child's desk. It means some families might have to move far away. How far? Very far, sweetie. By afternoon, the protests had spread across the globe. In Seoul, thousands of people gathered in Gwanghwamun Square. In Tokyo, crowds filled the streets around the Imperial Palace. In New York, protesters surrounded the United Nations building. In London, people marched from Parliament to Buckingham Palace. The protests were peaceful. Families held signs asking to stay together. Workers carried banners saying they wanted to remain on Earth. Children held drawings of their homes. Captain Nam Ji-hoon watched the Seoul crowd from his position outside the administrative center. He commanded the Human Auxiliary Police, Korean citizens who worked for the Valorian administration. Most of his men had joined the force because it was the only way to feed their families. His radio crackled. Captain Nam, this is Commander Vexhall. Disperse the protesters immediately. Sir, they're peaceful. They're just expressing their concerns. They are disrupting order. Use whatever force is necessary. Ji-hoon looked at the crowd. He saw teachers like Choi So-young, who had brought her students to hold a banner reading, "Please let us stay home." He saw elderly grandparents holding pictures of their grandchildren. He saw teenagers who had never known life before the Valorians, but still wanted to remain on the planet where they were born. Sir, requesting clarification. These are families with children. Captain Nam, you have your orders. Ji-hoon looked at his men. They were all Korean, all human. Some had children in that crowd. He made a decision that would change everything. Men, stand down. We're not moving against civilians. His radio exploded with angry alien voices. Captain Nam, you will follow orders. No, sir, I will not. Within minutes, Valorian soldiers surrounded the Human Auxiliary Police. The alien troops wore powered armor and carried energy weapons. They pushed past Ji-hoon's men and advanced toward the protesters. Commander Vexhal stepped from his transport vehicle. He was tall even for a Valorian, with gray skin and cold black eyes. He wore the blue uniform of a district commander, with medals that told of conquered worlds. Humans! His voice boomed across the square through amplified speakers. You will disperse immediately. Return to your homes and your assigned work duties. The crowd didn't move. If anything, more people arrived. Workers who had just finished their 16-hour shifts joined the protest. Students skipped classes to stand with their families. Choi So-young found herself near the front of the crowd. Her student stood beside her holding hands in a line. The youngest was barely 7 years old. We just want to stay with our families, someone shouted from the crowd. Silence! Vexhal raised his hand. You are subjects of the Valorian Empire. You will go where the Empire requires. An elderly man stepped forward. This is our home. Our ancestors are buried in this soil. Your ancestors are dead. Your loyalty belongs to the living Empire. More people pressed forward. The crowd was growing angry, but they remained peaceful. They chanted slogans asking to stay on Earth. They sang old Korean songs about their homeland. Vexhal turned to his soldiers. These humans do not understand discipline. Demonstrate the consequences of defiance. The Valorian soldiers raised their weapons. Captain Nam Ji-hoon stepped between the soldiers and the protesters. Commander, sir, please reconsider. These are innocent people. Move aside, Captain, or be moved aside. I cannot do that, sir. Vexhal drew his sidearm and shot Nam Ji-hoon through the chest. The Korean police captain fell to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. The square went silent. Then Vexhal gave the order that would haunt him forever. Open fire. The Valorian energy weapons lit up the square like lightning. People screamed and ran, but there was nowhere to go. The aliens had surrounded the area. Men and women fell as the deadly beams cut through the crowd. Choi So-young threw herself over her students, trying to shield them with her body. The 7-year-old girl she was protecting looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. Teacher, I'm scared. It's okay, baby. Just close your eyes. The energy beam that killed them both lasted only a second. When the shooting stopped, 847 people lay dead in Gwanghwame Square. 23 of them were children from Choi So-young's class. The teacher died holding them in her arms, but the Valorians had made a mistake. In their arrogance, they had allowed human camera crews to record the diplomatic announcement. Those cameras were still running when the shooting started. Within hours, footage of the Seoul massacre spread across every communication network on Earth. Despite alien attempts to block the transmissions, the videos reached every continent, every city, every home. The world watched Valorian. Soldiers murder children who were holding hands and singing songs about their homeland. World leaders who had cooperated with the aliens for 3 years suddenly found their voices. The President of the United States called it an atrocity beyond words. The Prime Minister of Britain demanded justice. The Secretary General of the United Nations condemned the brutal slaughter of innocents, but Commander Vexhal was unmoved by human outrage. At a press conference the next day, he stood before the cameras without emotion. Yesterday's events were regrettable but necessary, he said. Order must be maintained. The Empire's plans will proceed as scheduled. A reporter raised her hand. Commander, 23 children died yesterday. How do you justify killing children? I justify it by the maintenance of imperial order. Humans who cannot accept their place in the Empire become a threat to galactic civilization. So you feel no remorse? Vexhal's cold eyes stared directly into the camera. Remorse is a human weakness. The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. Those words would be broadcast around the world within the hour. Every human on Earth would hear a Valorian commander call their species inferior, while justifying the murder of children. In his underground hideout, Park Dae-ho watched the press conference with Kim Min-ho, Lieutenant Yoon Ji-won, and Ambassador Lee Ha-yoon. The physicist's quantum encryption device sat complete on the table between them. Is it ready? Dae-ho asked. It's ready, Min-ho confirmed. Dae-ho picked up the device and activated it. For the first time in 3 years, human resistance fighters could communicate without Valorian surveillance. Ji-won, contact every cell leader on the planet. Tell them the gloves are off. What's the message? Dae-ho looked at the screen showing Vexhal's emotionless face. Tell them we're done being patient. Park Dae-ho crouched in the darkness of the abandoned subway tunnel, his weathered hands checking his rifle for the 100th time. 3 years ago, he had been a commander in the South Korean Navy. Now, he was something the world had never seen before, a human resistance fighter against alien occupation. The Valorians had arrived on a Tuesday morning in spring. Their massive ships had blocked out the sun over every major city on Earth. Within hours, world governments had surrendered. The aliens called it a peaceful integration. They said humans would be protected under their empire. They promised prosperity and safety. All lies. Daeho heard footsteps echoing through the tunnel. He raised his weapon, then relaxed as he recognized the figure approaching. Kim Minho walked carefully through the rubble, carrying a small device that beeped softly in the darkness. "Any word from the surface?" Daeho asked. Minho shook his head. "Same as always." The Valorians increased the work quotas again. 16 hours a day now in the mining facilities. "People are getting sick," Daeho cursed under his breath. The aliens had turned Earth into their personal resource extraction site. Humans dug metals from the ground, processed rare minerals, and built components for alien technology, all while being told they were contributing to galactic civilization. "What about your project?" Daeho asked. Minho glanced around nervously even though they were alone. "Making progress. But I need more time. The quantum encryption is complex. If I make a mistake, the Valorians will detect everything we're doing." The device in Minho's hands was humanity's hope. For 2 years, the brilliant physicist had been working on a way to hide human communications from alien surveillance. The Valorians monitored everything: radio waves, internet traffic, even phone calls between family members. But Minho believed he could create a communication system they couldn't crack. Footsteps approached again. This time, 2 figures emerged from the shadows. Lieutenant Yoon Ji-won moved like a cat, silent and deadly. Behind her walked Ambassador Lee Ha-yoon, looking tired and worried. "What's the news from the diplomatic front?" Daeho asked Lee. Lee sat down heavily on a broken concrete block. "Bad, worse than bad. The Valorians called a meeting today. They're planning something big." "What kind of something?" "Relocation. They want to move 50 million humans off-world. They say Earth is too crowded and humans will be happier working on their mining planets." The tunnel fell silent except for the drip of water somewhere in the darkness. 50 million people, taken from their homes, their families, their world. "They can't be serious," Ji-won whispered. "They are," Lee said. "I saw the documents. They've already selected which cities to evacuate first. Seoul, Tokyo, New York, London. They want the most skilled workers." Daeho felt rage building in his chest. For 3 years, humans had endured the occupation. They had worked the long hours, followed the alien rules, and kept their heads down. They had hoped things would get better. They had been patient. "When?" he asked. 6 months. They're building transport ships now." Minho looked up from his device. "We can't wait 6 months. People won't stand for this. People will riot," Ji-won agreed. "And the Valorians will kill them." Lee nodded grimly. "That's what I'm afraid of. The alien commander Vexhal, he's not like the others. He enjoys causing pain. He's been pushing for harsher treatment of humans for months." Daeho had heard of Vexhal. The alien commander controlled the Seoul district and had a reputation for brutality. Any human who disobeyed orders disappeared. Some said they were sent to prison camps. Others whispered they were executed. "How many people know about this relocation plan?" Daeho asked. "Just the world leaders for now. But they can't keep it secret long. Too many people will need to know to make it happen." Daeho looked at each of his companions. Minho, the scientist who might give them secure communications. Ji-won, the pilot who could strike at alien targets. Lee, the diplomat who could gather intelligence from the inside. They were just 4 people in a tunnel. But they represented something the Valorians didn't understand. They represented human stubbornness. "Minho, how long do you need to finish the quantum encryption?" 2 weeks, maybe 3 if I'm careful." "You have 1 week." "Daeho, I can't." "You can. Because if you don't, 50 million people get shipped off-world like cargo, and after that it'll be 50 million more." Minho swallowed hard, then nodded. 1 week. "Ji-won, I need you to contact every cell leader you can reach safely. Tell them to prepare for something big. Don't give details, just tell them to get ready." "What about weapons?" she asked. "We'll make do with what we have. Humans have been fighting wars with improvised weapons for thousands of years." Lee stood up. "What do you want me to do?" "Keep pretending to cooperate. Gather intelligence. Find out everything you can about their military positions, their schedules, their weaknesses." "Daeho," Lee said carefully. "What are you planning?" Daeho checked his rifle one more time. then slung it over his shoulder. The Valorians think humans are weak because we've been patient. They think our cooperation means we accept their rule. He walked toward the tunnel entrance, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. They're about to learn the difference between patience and surrender. Above ground, Sol hummed with alien activity. Valorian ships moved through the sky like metal clouds. Alien soldiers patrolled the streets in their gleaming armor. Holographic broadcasts played on every corner, showing happy humans working alongside their alien protectors. But in the abandoned tunnels beneath the city, in hidden basements and forgotten bunkers, something was stirring. For 3 years, human anger had been building like pressure in a sealed container. The relocation announcement would be the final crack in that container. The Valorians had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that human patience was infinite. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. In the darkness of the tunnel, Park Daiho smiled grimly. The aliens thought they knew humans. They thought they understood what Earth's people were capable of. Soon, they would learn the truth.